Today we are making this replica of Lucille. For those of you who don't know, Lucille is Negan's bat on the show The Walking Dead. Basically, it's a baseball bat wrapped with barbed wire at the end. This is a nasty weapon, as you know if you've seen the show. So I'm going to be showing you how I made this replica. It probably goes without saying, if you're going to try a project like this, the very first thing you're going to need is, in fact, a bat. Now, a true DIY person would turn their own bat on a lathe. I don't happen to have one of those, so I got this one. This is a 36-inch bat from Louisville Slugger. The problem with this is it has a lot of labels and lettering and logos and things on it, as well as some kind of a protective coat, so we're going to need to sand that off. We want just the raw ash bat visible on the surface. We don't want any of these letters, we don't want any protective coating. In order to do that, we have a few options. We could use sandpaper. I'm going to prefer the random orbit sander because that's going to make faster work of the project. If you are using power tools, make sure you wear ear protection, some sort of eye protection. My glasses should be enough. And if you don't want to breathe sawdust, and you don't want to breathe sawdust, wear some sort of a mask. I should also point out, in the interest of dust management, my sander is connected to my shop vac, which will greatly reduce the amount of sawdust that this produces. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm going to finish it up with just one round of hand sanding on a finer grit just to make it a little bit more perfect. There we go. Smooth as a walker's bottom, so to speak. The next thing we need to do is darken this wood up. This ash is much too light of a wood. Negan's bat is significantly darker, so the next step is to stain this with the wood stain color of your choice. Do be sure to always use some sort of a protective drop cloth. And gloves are also helpful. I'm not using a pre-stain conditioner. Normally you would use a pre-stain conditioner to prevent the stain from coming out at all blotchy. But in this case, Lucille has seen some action, so if it doesn't come out perfect, that is just going to add some character. It should be pretty good. We'll let that sit for a minute, and then we'll wipe away the excess. Now, I'm not entirely satisfied with the way this came out. So though it's not strictly necessary, I'm going to stain it again with a second coat, just to darken it up a little bit more. And once again, wipe away all of the excess. And there we go. Not perfect, but again, this is a bat that has seen some action, and it will be covered with the barbed wire in the end. So I'm reasonably happy with the way this came out. This needs to dry for several hours before I apply a protective top coat. Okay, now that this has had a chance to dry for several hours, we're going to apply some spray lacquer to protect the wood. The next thing I did in order to get all of the accessories and small details right was to turn to my trusty notebook. I took measurements of this reference photo in order to determine the approximate length of barbed wire coverage and the approximate size of this decorative oval that's on Negan's bat. I then performed some simple calculations to get the approximate length of those elements on the 36-inch bat that I acquired from Amazon. I wasn't entirely satisfied with the results of those, but those served as a starting point, and then I sort of eyeballed the rest to get it looking about the way that I wanted to. And what I actually found was that this old Louisville Slugger logo gives me the right size of oval to put on the bat. I printed off an extra one of these just to be safe. In order to transfer this logo, or rather just the oval part of this logo, onto the bat, I'm going to use this adhesive vinyl material. And while I work on this, please forgive me if you hear a lot of background noise. I'm afraid the neighbors are being quite noisy, but it's about 1,000,000 degrees in here, so there's no way in hell I'm going to shut the window. All I need here is a length of this vinyl material, and I'm going to cut some off just to get the roll out of the way. This cut does not need to be precise at all. And we'll secure the vinyl to the cutting surface just using some strips of masking tape, just to make sure it doesn't slip around while I'm working on it. We'll also secure the logos to the vinyl, also using masking tape. This doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be enough to hold everything securely in place. That done, all I need to do is use the X-Acto knife to cut out just the oval shape. We don't actually need the bulk of the logo. As before, we're going to make this as perfect as we can, but it doesn't actually need to be perfect because once this is applied and painted onto the bat, we're going to age it and distress it quite a bit anyway. So mostly we just need the size and shape to be as close to this oval as we can reasonably make it without stressing too much about the fine details. And we'll actually cut out both of these shapes to make sure that we have plenty of backup just in case it's necessary. Alright, that's come free, so let's see how this one looks. Looks reasonably good. Not perfect, but we're going to clean that up a little bit anyway. So what I've done now is just to tape this negative back down so I can clean up the edges a little bit before I do the final transfer. Okay, that looks good. The next step, of course, is to place this cutout, this vinyl cutout, onto the bat itself. So to make it a little bit easier, I'm going to trim up the edges a little bit so I don't have to worry about overlapping anything on the bat. Now this is an adhesive vinyl, so I should just place it on the bat where I want it, and as long as I'm careful, I should be able to just secure it in place. This is a bit of a delicate operation because it wraps around the bat. And in fact, because it wraps around the bat, I end up with a few wrinkles in it, but for this purpose, that's going to be okay. I'll just iron those down with my thumb as tightly as I can, and we should still be okay. Because this is not actually a permanent fixture on the bat, it's just a mask. Then we'll do the same thing with this centerpiece. Carefully centering it in place here on the bat. It's not quite right. If you do this yourself, make sure you take your time to try to get it as close as you can. Again, everything about this bat is going to be aged and distressed, so it doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. It should just be as good as you can get it. The next thing I'm going to do is mask off the bat itself, except for this location right here, just to make sure that none of the spray paint ends up where it shouldn't. And there we have it, all properly masked up. I did apply another little piece of vinyl in that wide spot to clean it up a little bit, so that I'll have to do less sanding after I've painted, but it's now ready for some black spray paint. Okay, the next step is actually to apply our oval to the bat with spray paint. That should do it. While that dries, we can prepare the barbed wire. This is 18 gauge barbed wire, which is exactly what we're going to need. This wire looks just a little too new, so we're going to treat it with both the black and a little bit of the red spray paint, and then wipe it off, leaving it just in the nooks and crannies. That'll make it look older, like it's been used, like it's seen some action. That should do for the black. We're going to use the red, but we're going to use a little bit less of it. And similarly, we'll wipe off the bulk. It's very hard to do because the wire will just grab your cloth. It's also going to bite your fingers, so make sure you're careful if you do this. And the other side also gets a little treatment of the same. And that looks pretty good. We'll leave this to dry as well. Okay, at this point I have taken off all of the masking tape and the vinyl, leaving just the oval shape there. It looks pretty good. Of course, it looks still too new, so I'm going to take just a little bit of sandpaper and rough that up just a little bit, make it look old, make it look distressed, rough up the edges a bit. The trick with this is a light touch at first. You can always go back and take more off later, but you don't want to take too much and end up having to redo the whole thing. And that seems just about right. So all that's left is to take the barbed wire and wrap it around the bat. Now, first thing to do, one of the barbs is right here at the very end, and I don't want it there. I want to have a clean end to work with. So I'm just going to take a wire cutter and snip that off. And a word to the wise, when you do snip the end off of barbed wire, make sure that you actually find the end. You, particularly if your workshop is in a garage, you don't want this to end up in your car tire when you clean up and pull your car back in. In order to actually attach the barbed wire, I'm going to be using these U-shaped nails or staples. And we'll just pound these staples in with a hammer, but in order to make sure that we don't split the wood when we do so, I'm going to drill pilot holes. I think this first part, going over the top to get it started, is going to be the hardest part. Once it's started, we'll just be able to wrap it around. Now that we've got that started, we'll be able to just twist the bat to wrap it around. In order to do that, I'm going to use this little vise that I've set up here on my workbench to hold the wire into a manageable length. Because as you can see, this is not a particularly manageable length at the moment. This is much more manageable, however. The trick is, it's hard to do, but we just twist it. And every once in a while, we'll put a couple pilot holes and put another staple. And every few twists, we'll have to get another fresh length of wire into the vise. And just keep going. One nice thing about this particular set of staples is that they come in a few different widths. So I can just eyeball these pilot holes, and as long as I'm reasonably close, I'll find one that'll fit. When I'm reloading this wire into the vise, I'm holding the other edge down with my foot. Probably not wise, but I'm being careful. And I'm going to cut it off here. We can set aside this part we don't need. God, it's like 1,000,000 degrees out here. Another great tip would be to do this in the autumn rather than in the middle of summer, because this is miserable heat trying to wrap this barbed wire around. Now the very last thing is to deal with this loose end. I'm going to tuck it under one of these other ones, put a couple more staples through, and that should take care of it. Use pliers or something to bend the wire as necessary. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to put a couple more staples throughout just to reinforce a couple of spots. And there we have it. Lucille is finished, and my fingers are only bleeding just a little bit from the barbed wire. Alright, now that this is finished, all that's left is to find a place to mount this on my wall, and I have just the idea for doing it. And finally, to mount Lucille, I'm going to use these. These are wall-hanging brackets that are specifically designed for a baseball bat. They may not be designed for Lucille with the barbed wire, but they should work anyway. There's a wide end and a narrow end. They should hold the bat up. This is, of course, something I could make in my own workshop, but I happened across these on Amazon, and they'll get the job done just fine, so I can spare myself the trouble of actually building these little guys. And finally, Lucille takes her place in her new home here on the wall right outside of my study. Perfect. Well, that does it. The project is finished. I want to thank you, as always, for watching. If you haven't yet, please do be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more prop builds in the future. I know I've been promising them for a while, but this was a good one to start with, and I'm going to be doing more in the near future and onward into the more distant future. I also do a lot of other things, anything related to horror, so make sure you subscribe, ring that notification bell, and of course be sure to like this video, leave me a note down in the comments, do all those wonderful things that the YouTube people tell you to do. And until next time, take care and stay scared.